Hey everybody, it is Jonathan Kirsting here, hanging out with the Summer of 50 Pittsburgh Tech Stories. And I'm just having a lot of fun here because this is our opportunity to really put a focus on some of the great work that's happening. And today's story, it goes beyond Pittsburgh, which I think is so cool. I love it when Pittsburgh and other regions kind of come together to solve really tough problems. And that's our story today. And it's all around getting PPP, personal protection equipment, out to folks through the whole COVID crisis. And today we got this really cool combination going on here. And we're talking to Sam Ryman from the RK Mellon Foundation and Joe Chung from Red Star. And before we get into that, I always got to recognize Comcast as our sponsor here, because without them, I could not tell these stories. So thanks to Comcast for that. And as everyone knows, these stories, please go over to beyondthelaptops.org. We're trying to raise some money there, because the whole idea is to get as many computers into students' hands as possible. So when they go back to school in the fall, everyone's ready to start learning as far as that goes. So Sam and Joe, welcome to the show today. So glad to have you here. And I really cannot wait to tell this story, because when I heard about this, it's all about maskson.org. I was like, this is something that has to be in our 50 stories. So guys, thanks for hanging out.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So Sam, let's start real quick with your background in RK Mellon. I mean, everyone knows RK Mellon in Pittsburgh. You guys are like this pillar of what makes things happen in Pittsburgh. So what's your background real quick, and what's up with RK Mellon these days?
Well, so I serve as the director of the Richard King Mellon Foundation, and also am a trustee on the board of directors of the foundation. And my background started kind of initially here in Pittsburgh when I was in graduate school, Carnegie Mellon. Found my way into an internship where it helped me learn about philanthropy, and then long story short, found my way back to Pittsburgh and have been working in this space since 2007. And it's just a wonderful kind of moment in time to kind of be in this role in particular and at this foundation for us to be able to address all of the various problems and issues that we see as a part of this crisis. And I'm just excited to continue this work and to be part of this conversation here today.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, really, that's why Pittsburgh, I think, is just so blessed to have the foundations and to have like RK Mellon, because it has really made a difference as we've been navigating through the COVID situation. And so Joe Chung, Red Star, what are you doing hanging out with us today? I know you work on some really cool stuff, and the stuff that we're gonna be talking about today is, I think, it's gonna blow everybody's mind. So what's your background?
Thanks. So I grew up, born and raised in Chicago, moved to Boston when I was 17 to go to MIT, and I never left. So I'm 55 now. I've spent my entire professional career in this area doing startups. I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur. I don't know, if you kill like 4 people, that makes you a serial killer. So I suppose I must be a serial. But now, so I guess I'm probably best known for starting a company called Art Technology Group in the 1.0 e-commerce generation, web generation. So that was a pretty big software company. Took it public, did that whole thing. And then since I've just been working on companies that my best friend and business partner who started my first company with me, is still my best friend and business partner.
That's awesome.
We're starting companies we care about, and that's what Red Star is for. So, so I got roped into the Maskson thing, like everyone else, a little kind of serendipitously. I'm an alumnus of the Media Lab at MIT. One of the first people who got going on the Maskson project. Contacted someone at the Media Lab. They called me and said, "Hey, you should jump into this. I think they could use your help." And I ended up, helping lead that project.
Very cool. And so just give us our listeners just a little background on Masks On and what it's all about. Give us like the elevator pitch, for lack of a better term, for maskson.org.
Yeah. So it really began with 2 young anesthesiologist residents at a hospital called Brigham and Women's. It's one of the Harvard teaching hospitals. And they both independently kind of came up with the same idea when faced with this huge PPE shortage, which is still ongoing in many parts of the country. And the idea was pretty simple. One of them had just returned from Hawaii and had been doing a bunch of snorkeling with these sort of newfangled full face snorkel masks. And these go right over your head. I'm not going to put it on because you won't be able to hear me, but right like that. And it seals around your entire face. And you breathe. I have it removed right now, and I'll talk about this thing in a second. But you breathe through this snorkel tube, right? And in some sense, it was kind of like an obvious idea. Your head is in this hostile environment, salt water, where you can't breathe, and you're breathing through Exactly. And so the simplest, the idea they had was like, you could remove the snorkel attachment. And if you could attach one of these, which is a very, very high efficiency, but really common hospital breathing filter, if you could just put them together, then suddenly you have an amazing PPE where all of the air is being filtered through this is a 99.999% viral filter, 5 nines, versus a 95, so which filters 95%. So you can filter essentially 100% of all the air. And unlike the PPE shortage, these things are pretty widely available. There's no consumer demand for them. So their hospitals have them. So that was the idea. And they wanted to see if they reached out to the tech community in the Boston area to see if someone could make this happen.
Very cool. I mean, what an ingenious idea, snorkeling in Hawaii, and you get this idea, and then so the idea that we want to make this happen. So how did the RK Mellon Foundation get involved? How did you guys connect up and realize that there's some synergy going on here? By working together, we can start getting these masks into the right people's hands.
It started with the foundation putting together a strategy about how to respond to COVID-19. And there were 4 pillars of that strategy. The first being to support efforts around vaccine development. The second being to repurpose drugs that could have some impact on coronavirus. The third being investments in technology, whether that be rapid diagnostic tests or other technology such as apps to help slow or halt the spread of the disease. And then finally, repurposing manufacturing to make personal protective equipment for frontline workers and our healthcare practitioners. And so as we started to release information about that strategy, we deployed the press for the first time really in the foundation's history. It's not something that we had done prior.
Interesting.
We've been historically really quiet about the work that we do. And one of the benefits that we've observed kind of by doing that is not only to tell our story and to share all of these wonderful stories about the role of philanthropy in helping to address so many issues, but in particular, what it allowed us to do was to end up reaching audiences that we really didn't anticipate we would be able to connect with. And so very quickly, some of the relationships that I have in my network, in particular, in this case, an individual named Matt Flanagan, who runs a PR firm in Boston called Fama PR, saw some of the news that we put out and said, hey, really fascinating to see what you're doing. We had built a relationship. I've known Matt for a really long time. We talk about Boston and Pittsburgh and always are thinking about what are different ways we can connect the tech community, different ways we can sort of support each other's work, kind of in the nonprofit sector. And, we put our Patriots Steelers thing aside and said, how do we solve this common
I'm glad
problem?
you could do that.
Yeah, exactly. We just thought it's for the greater good. I mean, we just have to stop with the rivalry. And so he said, hey, I'm working with this wonderful group called Mask On. Sent me some of the information. And I said, hey, please broker the introduction. I think this is a wonderful technology. I think so much of what we saw coming out of this too is the innovation that Joe just described of entrepreneurs inventing things in real time, coming up with all of these solutions to major issues around total collapse of supply chains, inability for certain healthcare practitioners to get PPE because it's either too expensive or they're being outbid by some of the larger systems. And particularly in rural and low income communities where there's just virtually no resources to be able to do some of this work and to purchase this PPE. So when we got connected with Joe, we just had a couple of conversations. It was pretty clear right out of the gate that it was a match for our funding program. The fact that it was in Boston, what we do is we can work with anyone across the country as long as there's some benefit to Southwestern PA. And so that translated very quickly into us thinking through how many masks could be deployed into these communities that we are working in every day with support from the foundation. And so that's really what brought us together and then allowed us to kind of move at lightning speed to be able to bring these wonderful new masks and this technology that Joe and his team developed down here to the Pittsburgh region.
See, that's me. That's why that's what puts a huge smile on my face, because I just love seeing that there's resources in Pittsburgh. We can connect with some smart minds out in Boston. So when our two regions are working together, great things happen, and we're going to save lives and keep people safe. I mean, that's what it's all about. And being able to do that, as you said, like in lightning speed. So Joe, how long did it take to actually develop this mask and get it ready and get it into people's hands?
Yeah, so I think speed is one of the most important things that's been part of the whole story here. And when I tell the story about the program, this is something that in some sense just couldn't have happened except because of the pandemic, and then technologies like Zoom being able to very rapidly make connections, but build trust, understanding, and then move forward into some action. So this is a story of three disparate groups who don't normally work very closely together or very tightly together, coming together in a very, very rapid period of time. So there's the medical industry. Those are the doctors who needed these things, who were facing, doing intubations, facing aerosolized virus every day, and really, being very concerned for themselves and for their colleagues. The high-tech community, folks who are good in computers and manufacturing and just know how to build things, and then philanthropy. And what became very apparent to us pretty quickly at the beginning of this is back in mid-March now, was that, the rich hospital systems were probably going to be okay because they have tons of money. And if they're buying N95s on the open market, they're going to win.
Okay.
It was everybody else that was going to suffer. And this was, not a great consequence of the sort of free market dynamics. So what we realized really early on is that this is a pretty expensive piece of gear. And one thing I should say, in some ways, it should be more economical than the disposable N95s because this is reusable. So this lasts for kind of indefinitely. The filters last for quite a long time, and these are cheap. These are a couple bucks. But to get one of these, this is like a $50 recreational scuba mask, a snorkel mask, and it costs about $10 or so to make one of these. This is the fabricated adapter that we created. This is the hard part in some sense. It looks just a dumb little piece of plastic, but getting this exactly right is pretty tough. And then you have to assemble it and get it out there. We realized really early that if we were going to have an impact for the communities that really mattered, we had to donate these. We couldn't ask people to buy them. We couldn't go through. We couldn't make them cheap or subsidized. We just had to have clinicians be able to request them. We vet the request. We send the masks, and that was the issue. And that's obviously where philanthropy comes in. The only way to do that is to have the mission-oriented dollars that can enable us to fulfill that mission immediately. So, I think if we looked at any kind of purchasing procurement process, you'd be talking weeks, months. It's a very hard thing for people to buy stuff. If you're just donating directly to the physicians, we're talking days, and that's what happens.
It's all about times of the essence. And what just really gets me fired up is the fact like RK Mellon stands up to do this type of work, right? And that they see the need, they're able to mobilize those dollars and put them in the right place, put it in the folks' hands that are working super fast and innovating super quick. And all of a sudden we have this completely unique solution. I mean, what is not to like about that? So how many masks are on people's faces right now? How many are in the field doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, so we've sent over 18,000 of these now.
Oh my goodness.
Wow. And because of the generosity of RK Mellon and our other benefactors, we have capacity for at least another 10,000, and probably more than that. We're still working out, exactly we get money coming in, got masks going out, but we're good, and we want to keep, we really want to get the word out. The other challenge is that the places we're trying to reach aren't necessarily the easiest to target with our message.
Exactly.
So again, I think one of the huge benefits of working with RK Mellon in the Pittsburgh area is their local knowledge and awareness, and be able to build that presence in the Southern Allegheny. So I think that's really important to us as well. So we're trying to get the word out, and the masks are available. We are seeing resurgences of the virus across the country, and I think this is something that is a really valuable resource.
And I love the fact that like it has a very long life. Like it's not disposable. You can keep using it over and over again, which I think is just really important, because I think as we all know, we're going to see resurgences in certain areas, and at some point, like you hadn't used it for a while, now you have it. There's not that rush to figure out like who has the mask. Like, no, I got it. It's right here. It's ready to go. So I think that's a really important part as far as that goes. So what's next as far as that is? It seems like obviously the future's wide open, and what are next steps?
Well, I think, one of the most exciting things is getting these devices to folks who don't normally, you wouldn't necessarily think of. So, originally we were thinking the folks doing the intubations, just the clinical medical workers, emergency room people, that and whatnot. We got a request through Sam and the Arcade Mellon Foundation to equip, I think, 300 or 400 firefighters. Is that emergency response
Yes.
Firefighters in the area? And maybe Sam, you can probably fill a little more details there. But that to me was incredibly exciting because again they're struggling with getting the appropriate PPE. They saw this as a perfect solution. They were very comfortable with the technology, and so I think that was pretty great. So I think that we're looking at as the economy reopens, and yet emergency workers and frontline workers are still facing personal hazard. I think that's really the thing that really sticks with me. We're asking folks to risk their lives in the course of facilitating our lives, and I feel like we owe it to them to protect them as best as we can.
Very much so.
Right. Yeah. I think to Joe's point, looking at the sort of the benefit of philanthropy, I think typically it's viewed as, well, there's capital and that's the primary contribution that a philanthropy or a donor can make. But I think increasingly it's sort of the networks that we bring to these discussions as well. And I'd say Joe and his life as a venture capitalist and also as a startup entrepreneur understands that well. And I think it's less understood kind of in the work that we do in the nonprofit space. And so when you've got this wonderful mask, absent that network, it would have required Joe and his team to knock on doors and to sort of build relationships with people from scratch. I think in particular, our ability to sort of go directly to the federally qualified health centers, which there are 20 of them across the city of Pittsburgh and the county, and those are serving the most at-risk residents here who typically have no ability to pay for their health care. The firefighters that Joe mentioned, so in the rural communities, volunteer firefighters are all there is. Like these aren't paid entities. They have virtually no dollars for any of this equipment. So separate from COVID, think about it for a second, like when they respond to a car fire, the synthetic materials and those types of things that burn in those fires have been increasing rates of cancer and other things among volunteer firefighters and firefighters in general. So they've had to purchase like really sophisticated respirators. So this is another example of that. They're showing up to participate in the calls where they're transporting individuals who may be infected with coronavirus to the hospital, but yet they don't have PPE. So those are the types of things that you don't really think about. In particular, though, too, all of these are starting to come together in the sense that when we supported the work to get the rapid oral COVID diagnostic test into those federally qualified health centers, now 5,000 tests into those spaces where, again, if you have no healthcare or you have limited ability to get on transit and go through some of the traditional drive-throughs or go to your physician, now you can just walk right into one of these FQHCs, you get the diagnostic test. Well, what if you're on the other end and you're a physician and you don't have PPE? So it's great that we now have this ability to test, but if the healthcare workers aren't protected, so all of these things, there's this kind of complementary nature to it. And we've been trying really hard to understand sort of the entire system and how, if you want free accessible testing, you also have to have close to free and accessible PPE in those communities that have the least ability to pay for them. And so I think that's a wonderful example of how this all comes together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, I think this story just goes to show the worst of times brings out the absolute best in people and organizations to come together and make things happen as far as that goes. So my final question for the day, this is our Comcast question of the day, since we're all about trying to bridge the digital divide and we're trying to raise some money on that for beyond the laptops. What are some of the best things that we can be doing as individuals or as a nation or as a community to shorten this divide, to bridge the gap as far as that goes? Any thoughts on that, Sam? And I'll ask Joe as well, too.
Well, I can speak to the work that we're doing at the foundation. I think certainly kind of as part of our economic impact and recovery, which is a separate pillar of our COVID-19 response, we wanted to get out ahead of the issues that we knew were coming as a result of sort of the economic collapse associated with the pandemic. And one of the significant consequences of that are that you don't have kids in school. And so we funded quite a bit of work to sort of repurpose and refurbish computers and other technology to get those into the hands of kids immediately. looking at partnerships or funding partnerships with Carnegie Mellon around creating Wi-Fi networks that are extended across the communities that don't have access to broadband. So similar to the idea of you've got curative tests to do the diagnostics, but you don't have PPE, if you have Wi-Fi but no computers or vice versa. So we kind of have to look at that kind of comprehensively. And so those are just a few of the different things we're working on. The last thing I'd say, and I think this is a great sort of segue into the work that Joe's doing, is all of that broadband and Wi-Fi computers also can be linked very clearly to 3D printers and the types of tools that have become so commonplace in the way that education is being delivered, and this new hands-on DIY ability to experiment, and the filters that Joe has been talking about that attach to those masks, many of them are 3D printed using additive manufacturing. And so I think it's separate from just like the basics of how do we get people Wi-Fi, how do we get them computers, how do we enable them with these new devices and technologies that truly represent Industry 4.0 and are now accessible and can be right in your own home, and to incorporate that into the way that all kids are learning about technology, but also thinking about what they might do as a career in their future. So those are a few thoughts from my
You're taking it one step further there, Sam. I like that. Joe,
I know. Hey,
I love it, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more with what Sam said. I think the return on investment on putting these enabling technologies into kids' hands, especially at this time when they're not going to be in the physical schools or will may get locked out and be have to go back and forth between physical and virtual. You just couldn't get a better return on investment in a society. So I think coordination is probably the most important thing. There's so much great stuff that's happening. What you want to do is you want to have it together with a common purpose under coordination. And I'm really encouraged at the role that the large foundations like RK Mellon can play in these things. I saw it firsthand in my own experience here. And I should say I'm actually a trustee. I'm on a charitable foundation board, a fairly significant one here in Boston. We would never have been able to move at this speed in this way. And we did do some very quick things in Boston. I don't want to denigrate my colleagues in any way, but this is a different model, and I think it's really fascinating, and one that I hope that other organizations will pick up on and start utilizing. So I think that role of coordination is, as opposed to just writing checks, I think is a really important one.
Great insight, guys. I cannot thank you enough for being part of the show today. I think it's just a fantastic, awesome story. So glad I had the chance to tell a little bit of it. Encourage everyone to check out maskson.org and see all the good work going on there. Sam Ryman from RK Mellon, Joe Chung from Red Star, you guys smashing it up in a good way. Absolutely love it. Hey, this is
Thank you.
Kersing. Absolutely. This is Jonathan Kersing hanging out with Comcast.
Thanks, Jonathan.
50 summer stories of everything happening in Pittsburgh's tech ecosystem. Thanks for checking it out, everybody.